Alright guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to be covering the difference between the having clause and the where clause. So the where clause puts a condition on these attributes that we're going to be selecting from a table using the from clause. The having clause will be putting a condition on the attributes and also be used when we're using an aggregate function within our SQL query. Now, the where clause cannot be used with aggregate functions, and the having clause has to be used when using an aggregate function. Now, what is an aggregate function, you might ask? And these are the more common ones: sum, count, average, min, max, right? Whenever you pass in a list of attributes into the sum or count or any of one of these, it will return either the sum of all of them, the count, which is how many of the attributes you've entered, average, or so on and so forth, min, max, pretty self-explanatory. Let's look at an example. So today we're going to look at Teaches 2018, which is the table name, and then these are the teacher names and the class sizes, individual class sizes for that year. So John teaches 2 classes right here and right here. Jason teaches quite a bit, actually 5 classes. And as you can see, because John only teaches 2 classes, he only teaches 56 students in total, and Jason teaches for 144. Jake and Jakey, there you go. When you apply this query to the database, we can see that we can group these teachers with the total amount of students that they teach. Now, if we wanted to just get the class sizes, which are less than 60, we can use the having clause because we're using the aggregate sum function, which is sum class size, as CS, right? So we're just doing that. And we can filter that, so we're not going to include Jason. We're only going to include John, Jake, and Jakey. Here we're using the where clause. Now we can't use the where clause on the aggregate function sum, so now that's going to return an error, right? All right, now let's look at one more difference between these two clauses. We can actually use the where clause and the having clause to get the same result, but we have to keep in mind that the where comes before the group by and having comes after the group by. This basically means that over here we're going to be filtering the attributes before we group them. So this is going to be a little bit faster because we're going to be executing these commands on the ones that are being filtered. Over here, we're going to be grouping before we're going to be filtering, right? So over here, we can see that this query will take a little bit longer of a time. So because we're actually going to be grouping, and then all of these actions are going to be taken in on all of these attributes, and then we're going to group them. So some of the actions that we're going to be doing on these attributes are going to be useless. Over here, we can see that we've gotten rid of Jakey, so now we're only looking at John and Jake, right? So over here, that's what we get. And over here, we can see that we can use where and having in one big SQL query. The only difference is that we're using having to actually to implement the aggregate function sum, so that we can have CS, the class size, less than 55, and the where clause over here is only filtering these attributes. So that's basically the use of the where clause. All right, guys, thank you for listening in.